Alan, how do you, across all your leagues that you manage, how do you properly identify prime stash candidates, especially in this week one period where you find the guys like Puka Nacua, the people who are really, really league changers?
Right. And we're always speaking in like a dynasty context, I'm assuming,
Correct.
right? It is the
Yeah.
Dynasty Roundtable, right? Now, I mean, just like you guys, I play in these like super sicko deep 30 bench leagues. So finding these guys, it's a little bit even, dirtier than going for the RB3. Remember the days where you could just find RB3s on the waiver wire and just stick them on the back of your roster? It doesn't work like that anymore. Like you have to like look on in the depth charts, look who the practice squad guys are that could get elevated. And also, who could give you 1 week when you need it the most? When you're stuck out in the week 9 ocean with no life preserver, who could be somebody that you could just plug in? It always comes to mind, guys. Remember a bunch of years ago when David Montgomery was on the Bears and like Khalil Herbert, like literally saved you for like 2 weeks. He was a 5th round pick in our rookie drafts. Nobody wanted him. There was some buzz about him. So the running backs that could give me a week when I'm in the depths of a must-win, double-digit week 10, week 11.
Yeah, I hear you. And what I really like about Dynasty, and like this conversation kind of plays into fantasy too, not as much, but what I like about Dynasty is it really preps you very well to handle the back half of your roster in fantasy football. It's where these two different sects of fantasy football meet, I think. So when you're going about your fantasy drafts, you're like, man, maybe it's kind of like choose your own adventure novel at the back end of your fantasy draft, because it's like, do I want Kamani Vidal? Do I want Marshawn Lloyd with my last pick? Do I want, all these players are just prime fantasy stashes, but we know about them in Dynasty. And you're right, when you talk about a stash in Dynasty, like I just put out a video on this channel, and finding a player like that's not rostered in a ton of leagues, my cutoff's typically about 50% of sleeper leagues, is challenging. And to really make a case for a player that's not owned in 50% or more of sleeper leagues is a challenging thing to do, but it's also challenging in fantasy too. So Matt, do you have any stashes like in fantasy or Dynasty that you're looking at right now?
Guys, before Matt answers that, just quick, Matt, do you guys even stash like Dalvin Cook types, like these dusty, like Leonard Fournette? Are these guys someone that you'll stick on the back end? Kareem Hunt, there's not even on a team. They still have him on a couple rosters.
Yeah, I mean, Kareem Hunt, as we start drawing a line on old dusty backs that aren't signed to a team, but the ones that are signed to a team, when you think of a stash, right, it's just like you said, Alan, like who can I potentially lean on in a dire situation? Or think about the transactional aspect of Dynasty as well. Can I get a free pickup and even get a 3rd round pick for a competing team? Think about if Zeke went down today and Dalvin Cook was actually getting 12-ish touches a game, goal line work for the Cowboys. You're selling to a competitive team. I guarantee you'll get a 3rd from somebody. The way, late 3rds are treated in Dynasty. So there's value there. And the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And when I think about a stash, I look at first and foremost, is there anybody who is within the next few weeks has a path to opportunity, albeit injury, maybe a take that I'm very bullish on. We project the opposite of that. What if Ezekiel Elliott truly is washed? Rico Dowdle isn't that good of a running back. And
What
Dalvin
if? What do you mean, what if? Isn't that like fact?
yeah, I mean, those are facts. I tend to believe that they're both good enough to spell Dalvin Cook, but there certainly is a reality out there where Dalvin Cook gets 6 touches, maybe even a touch, falls into the end zone week 1. And I look like a fool. And at the end of your roster, it's worth a 1 week look. And specifically, this is why, it kind of takes me into my response to Seth's question. First and foremost, to start the season, I want to first look at guys that play. We now have these primetime games before week 1 kicks off on Sunday. So you get a free look at some of these guys. Philly, Baltimore, Green Bay, Kansas City. I said those in the wrong order, but all 4 of those teams play before Sunday. So Justice Hill, who He doesn't meet Seth's, strict 50% requirement, but still over, 30% of leagues that Justice Hill is not rostered in, is going to get work week 1. Probably the easiest if he's on your waivers. Take advantage of that right now. Just see what happens. Johnny Wilson on the Eagles. We look at depth charts. Paris Campbell was a surprising cut. He's on the practice squad. Jahan Dotson was just traded, knows less of the playbook than Johnny Wilson does. Late round draft pick who may have been discarded since your rookie draft. Has a path to playing time here in the Eagles offense. So that's an interesting look as well. And then on the Packers, Emmanuel Wilson with the Marshawn Lloyd injury, absolutely worth the stash, whether you like him or don't. And this is where I think in stashes, we get a little too caught up in player takes, where it's less about the take and more about the cost and the reward. Hitting on an Emmanuel Wilson could be huge for your fantasy team. And if in the first 2 weeks he's getting no opportunity and a better stash arises, you go for that player. So all that to kind of sum up and say, first and foremost, look for paths to opportunity, and maybe throw your player takes kind of aside and think about just what the risk reward of the situation is.
I like what you said there, Matt, because I've been accused of this. Oftentimes I have opinions, of very strong opinions on players, but when we talk about dynasty stashes, you said it. Is there a pathway to opportunity? I don't really care necessarily about the talent profile. Sure, it helps, but like, what do the coaching staff and the team, what are they telling us about a player? Like, they clearly, like, to go back to the example that you talked about earlier, the Cowboys are bringing in Dalvin Cook. Why are they doing that? Probably they probably have an idea in mind of how to use Dalvin Cook should an opportunity come up. What if Rico Dowdle goes down? What if Zeke's not effective, right? So there are these scenarios that nobody can predict in fantasy football that happen every year, right? I mean, I know everybody, the favorite thing to say in the fantasy community right now is, oh, I know you're not going to believe this, but I saw Puka Nacua coming last year. But there were a ton of people who did not see Puka Nacua coming this last year, and that I'm one of them. So
Darrell Henderson was saved a few people's weeks last year. Remember that? He was off the couch. Running backs off the couch are, that's what I'm saying. Like, and they're actually available. Like a lot of some of these other guys, that they get drafted in rookie drafts. So it's so, the pickings are slim, right? I mean, it also has to be players that you would never, that just nobody wants. Like, I'm seeing people right now pick up Hassan Haskins. He was like the easiest cut a year and a half ago. Like, I clipped them off, all my rosters, and now he's trending on Sleeper as a pickup because, look, I mean, do you feel solid about any of the Charger running backs that they could be like, that they're going to last the whole season? Hell no, right? So guys like that, the non-sexy, just that could get you by for a week. So that when Matt was talking about some of the wide receivers, I just, I get it, it's those guys just, you're never going to know when to start them. That's the bad part. And their best weeks will come on your bench. Well, at least I'm not great at picking start sits, but at least if Emmanuel Wilson, you talked about him, you will know when he gets a clarified start. Josh Jacobs tweaks an ankle and he's going to miss 1 week. Wilson gets a clarified start. So that's why originally I put forward the idea of running backs, no matter, I'd take RB3s over these kind of like, and Paris Campbell is already, you said, pushed down the practice squad, but any of these Johnny Wilson types, which, by the way, I do like Johnny Wilson. So I don't mean to pick on Johnny and that pick that you said there.
No, you're absolutely right. Because even if, God forbid, AJ Brown, went down, sat out today, is he the starting X? Sure, technically. What does his route participation look like? His target share? What does this offense even look like with him in? We can't project that sort of one-to-one opportunity, but with running backs, that's not as true. We can potentially, predict when Josh Jacobs goes down, if he goes down, the rushing volume would take a hit. Sure. They would target the backfield less, probably. But you're going to know if Emmanuel Wilson is set up to get 10 to 15 touches if he's the starter in the offense. And so I agree with you when we're looking at stashes, it is, running backs over everything. I try and structure my teams such that I'm searching for these running back assets. And if you're looking, if you're on a deeper dynasty league and you have, 3-4 quality receivers on your bench that you're not playing, you have no use for another receiver. But you almost always, there's no team that couldn't benefit from a starting running back in the NFL.
Right, Seth, what's the worst part of fantasy football? Deciding, should I play Jerry Jeudy or Christian Watson in my flex 3, right? Like, what? Yeah. I mean, that one might be a little easier than most, but you get the point.
Yeah, when it comes back to roster construction too, like when we're thinking about, and I think Matt and I basically agree on the principle of how you should construct a dynasty team, is I kind of don't like running backs for the simple reason, like I feel like if I load up on later round running backs in the dynasty startup, I don't want to wait too long. But if I load up on, like I said, the Kamani Vidal types, the Marshawn Lloyd types, heck, the Zeke Elliott types, if we want to go dusty, right? I feel like if I take enough shots on those guys, I can find solutions. And like it just feels like, and I don't know, Alan, you can feel free to disagree with me. It just feels like the veteran running backs are some of the easier assets to acquire in dynasty. So if you build around wide receivers, obviously in Superflex we want quarterbacks and tight ends. The final piece of the puzzle, and I know this isn't dynasty stash per se, but I think it ties in, like the cherry on top of a dynasty construction of a roster could be that veteran running back, could be that dynasty stash that you're looking for.
Matt, you can jump in here for a second, but the thing about the wide receivers, that if it's a name someone likes, like Johnny Wilson was someone that people liked, if he actually does get 60 yards and a touchdown on your bench, you can probably trade him for Devin Singletary, right? Like that week. So there is a path to, there is a benefit of those guys going off on your bench too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You're definitely not disqualifying any of those players, but it is just about understanding, the probability that this guy makes it into my starting lineup. And, you can pull off a trade with Johnny Wilson, but a lot of dynasty managers, the more casual, the less risk averse dynasty managers are going to want something that's more solid. So I still feel like even in less competitive dynasty leagues or less, high stakes dynasty leagues, like you're going to be hard pressed to get value for Johnny Wilson sight unseen.
Oh, but someone like Jermaine Burton, if he has a week, if they have
a week,
right.
If they have a week, you could chip him off,
right? Malachi Corley, another one, right? People liked him. There was someone in your league that liked him. I'm not saying you guys specifically. So if he has a rushing touchdown and like 4 catches for 40 yards, like if they give him the Deebo Samuel end around or something like that, like. He can, those are guys that you can, if you're looking to acquire the running back. So when you're talking about stashes, unless, in 20 deep rosters where, Corley, any of your second round / third round wide receivers you took in rookie drafts are borderline cuts when you have the roster squeeze.